Welcome to the Clear to Close podcast with your host, local mortgage expert Ryan Bolton. Ryan has the questions and answers, tips and tricks, do's and don'ts, and expert guests to explain all the steps needed to buy or sell real estate. And now it's time for the Clear to Close podcast.
Hey everyone, my name is Ryan and I am a mortgage nerd. Today I've got Jared Plewe with me, one of our great local experts, and we want to talk about a pretty hot topic today, and that is housing affordability. So Jared, again, I really appreciate your expertise. Jared is with Infinity Title. That is a local title insurance company here in Southern Utah, one of my go-to title guys, and just always really enjoy having you on the show. We've always had some great conversations about the market and that kind of thing. So what a relevant topic we have and such a hot button issue with the combination of interest rates and the combination of home prices and lack of inventory from people just not selling their existing homes because of either the price jump up or the interest rate jump up. So let's talk about housing affordability.
Yeah, let me just, I guess, kind of set the stage for you and why this has been something top of mind for me. Let me read you, and this is kind of what prompted it was President Trump gave an executive order about affordability. And it struck me what he said in that executive order and what he didn't say. And so it's been something that I've been kind of thinking a lot about recently. So let me just set the stage by reading. This is kind of like an article, kind of first paragraph. And this kind of tells you, I don't want to say crisis, but it tells you the state that we're in.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But according to Bankrate's latest 2025 housing affordability study, prospective home buyers are still burdened by the most challenging U.S. housing market in decades, with the average home requiring an annual household income of $116,986. Since early 2020, so just 5 years ago, when the income required to purchase a typical home was $78,236, a near 50% increase.
In just a 5-year window.
In 5 years.
Not even a full 5 years yet. We're not even through 2025 yet. So,
right. Yeah.
I remember seeing something was like 86,000. It jumped up pretty quick year over year. So to see that 5-year number, that's actually a pretty surprising number.
Yeah. So that's, and obviously the median household income hasn't kept pace with that.
Right.
So in the last 5 years, it hasn't gone up 50%.
Right.
And so that creates the issue that we've got right now. And this is from President Trump's executive order. So this is on January 20th, 2025. And this is what he says. So I hereby order, it's kind of funny how he dictates that.
Right.
I hereby order the heads of all executive departments and agencies to deliver emergency price relief consistent with applicable law to the American people and increase the prosperity of the American worker. This shall include pursuing appropriate actions to lower the cost of housing and expand housing supply. And he goes on to say a few different things, but lower the cost of housing and expand housing supply. And those two are intertwined. When we talk about lower cost of housing, I mean, he's big on deregulation. And so the idea is if we can deregulate and cut some of the red tape of building permits, impact fees, if we can reduce those costs, then those cost savings will theoretically pass on to the home buyer. And then expand housing supply. Well, if you expand housing supply, that's going to do what to values?
Yeah, it should bring them down. There's more competition, more houses. But I also think it's interesting that when I was reading some of those things, and maybe it's different in different states, but it isn't necessarily a federal cost for many of these permits, many of this stuff, other than maybe the land they control in the West. In the West, they control a lot of land between state and fed. I mean, Utah and Nevada, it's like 70% of the state is either state or federal land that isn't released to be able to add to help with our inventory, where all the permits and all those things are usually county and local levels. So I don't know how much that, obviously this is the precedent. It kind of sets the idea, sets the tone, which can help kind of work its way through the system as just the administration trying to say, hey, we're going to help you with anything you're trying to do to have this executive order work. But it is interesting to see, maybe it's on different states. I don't know of a federal building permit, that type of stuff.
Well, that's why I kind of laughed
but EPA
when he
stuff
started
can be there, like the EPA releasing land or being able to have more tracks that are open for development, I think would definitely help. But still will take a few years for that stuff, turning dirt on land out in, it's going to take a while to get utilities and all the other stuff to that.
Yeah, and like in southern Utah, most of the public land that becomes developed property is SITLA,
Right.
which is state.
Right.
We have BLM, like you said, and one of the things that I've heard him say is that we're going to open up, like BLM land
Right.
for housing.
And I tell you, that has been a bottleneck, like trying to get something approved on BLM that's not kind of part of their, and it's the Bureau of Land Management, not the other BLM that's out there. So the Bureau of Land Management, and then you've got SITLA, which is the school trust lands. That's what a lot of the funding for schools is. A lot of lands owned by the state, so they sell land in chunks, and they kind of make sure they do it in waves for funding other projects. So there's weird periods where there's just nothing for sale for a while, and then there's a wave of stuff they have to build, and we're seeing, like you said, in southern Utah, we've got a ton of land that's just kind of in that weird bureaucracy of they're not even putting it up to be able to buy. Even if a developer wanted to buy 700 acres somewhere, they can't.
Right.
They can't even if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And there's even swaps you can't even do. So, I've got this tract of land over here. You've got this tract of land. Let's work on somewhere we can swap it. That type of stuff for either environmental protection. So it really does put a weird stranglehold, especially in Utah, on freeing up land for development. There's just not a lot of private land to buy.
Right. Yeah, and that's always going to be a struggle for affordability in Utah is that there's so much public land. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we want to go to slide 1, I'm just kind of showing. So I looked at, in Washington County, well, this is actually St. George Greater. So let's compare over the last 20 years, median sales price to median household income. So you can see the sales price in red is, steady increase. We've had some dips. And the household income has pretty much stayed stagnant.
Right.
It's going up a little bit, but it's definitely, you can see from that it's not following.
It's always been one of the bigger separations between the median home price and the median income is in Washington County. It has been that way a lot of times. You've got that same kind of issue in like Palm Springs and Park City, some of the Monterey. You're going to have some of these areas but St. George is surprising. The median income hasn't afforded the median home like your chart showed there for decades, and the gap is getting worse.
It's getting worse.
Dramatically worse.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and so if you go to slide 2, I put that into I call it ITP indicator. So income to price percentage. So
hashtag that, people.
Yeah. So the blue line is just the percentage. So again, we're looking at St. George, Utah, and so this is just household income over the sales price, median sales price. And so as a percentage, so you can see that percentage has kind of been all over the place. In red is the average for St. George, and in yellow is the national average.
Oh, interesting.
And so that's St. George, you can see, is below the national average. So it's like you're talking about. We're just always going to be a lower percentage, or there's always going to be an imbalance between median income and median sales price.
And this is probably the resort nature, retirement destination. It's kind of the nature of kind of what drives people to the southern Utah market.
Right. Yeah, and it's just becoming more and more that way. But if you look at the last few years, we're well below what our average is. And so regression to the mean, right? So you would think that eventually over the next few years, we're going to get closer to what our average has been, which means one of two things. So if we go to the next slide.
Let's pull up that number. Pull up number 2 again real quick. I want to look at one other thing real quick. So that's from 2024. So kind of the
2004.
2004. So that 2010 was kind of that high point there. And now we're well below even the 2005. That's what I was kind of looking at, that 2008 crisis kind of number to what we're seeing here is even a bigger separation.
Yeah. So when we went through the housing crisis in 2008 and everything bottomed out, that's where you have the highest percentages in 2010, 2011.
Okay.
And so we were in good balance at that point where income to sales price was good. It was above the national average and below.
So it was leaning towards the income side of things and not the price side of things.
Yeah,
now
so housing was affordable.
Okay.
It was very affordable at that time.
Okay.
And now we've swapped, and we've up to 2020, we were working back towards that average that we've had, and then COVID hit and we just plummeted below that. Right. And housing became extremely unaffordable for us in St. George.
Yeah, that That's a really good chart there. I think that's probably a really helpful chart. So hopefully you're watching the video. You can take a screenshot of that as well. It'll be on our YouTube channel to be able to really see the numbers there of that separation, because we always feel it in Southern Utah, but to actually see the historical numbers with it really does put an interesting twist on this idea of income to price. I really like that ratio. It looks really good.
So before you go to the next slide, don't show the next slide for us.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you some questions.
Oh boy,
because
here we go.
I looked at it state by state.
Okay.
And you haven't looked at these, right?
Nope.
Yeah. So what would you say is the best state? And best meaning that the highest percentage of income to sales price.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So what do you think are kind of at the top as far as states
There's
go?
got to be some rural areas like Wyoming. You got to think like the Dakotas, maybe stuff like that. So is there a metropolitan area? Is it kind of a minimum size kind of thing or is it per state?
Just per state.
Oh, per state. Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be my first guess. Is something like a Wyoming, not a Colorado, something that's not necessarily a resort, but has maybe a different type of income stream. The Dakotas always seem to be kind of a better income versus cost of housing. Idaho falls into that category. So those are the ones that would jump off the page for me.
All right.
We got 50 states, but let's
see how we did.
All right.
So these are the top. So Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois, Indiana,
Okay.
Kansas.
Okay.
So those areas there. And look at the percentage. I mean, the national average is 21%.
Really? Okay.
And Iowa 34%.
That's
Housing
okay.
in Iowa is
So to break that
affordable.
down, yeah, the price of the home in comparison to the median income is way closer to what it you need less income to qualify for the median home.
Yeah.
Under the national average by that 13%. That's incredible. Okay.
Yeah.
Even that surprises me that it's even that high in that sense, that because for the longest time it didn't take that much income to even qualify for a home, even in these areas that are quote, more of a balance, like you're saying.
Right.
But it is interesting to see kind of the states that don't really drive a lot of the resort communities, don't drive a lot of the retirees aren't going to those areas quite as much. So that's probably what's leading kind of that idea, would be my guess.
There's always a reason, right?
Right.
Like you look at that chart, we're not going to pack our bags and move to Iowa. It's like, I don't want to live in Iowa.
Right.
So there's always a reason why, that there's more of a balance.
The
there.
Cornhuskers are going to start, tagging you or something. I don't know.
So the flip side. So what do you think are the worst states?
Oh man, the worst. Okay, so you got to think California because of just the housing expense, how much, but they also make a lot more income, and so it's kind of a funny thing as a ratio. Yeah, maybe it does cost more for the house, but also their average median income is a lot higher as well. Mm-hmm. So that California always seems to be one of the ones. New York, just because of the cost of housing. Florida might be getting up there. Alaska, I don't think even Alaska and Hawaii is probably going to fall under that. So we're going to pick on California because it's the state. So we're going to go California, New York, and Florida.
Let's see.
Here we go. Let's look at this chart. Oh,
so
interesting. Utah.
District of Columbia is not really a state, obviously, but it is
okay.
by far the absolute worst at 9%.
Oh, I have heard that.
So,
and I've heard, ever since some of the stuff with Doge and stuff like that, and a lot of people getting fired, they've had listings, like they have had the biggest increase in like any time frame in tracked history of listings hitting the market.
Oh,
It's been
I'm sure it's
absolutely ballistic how many people have listed their properties.
Yeah.
But anyway,
so expect values to go down in District of Columbia.
Oh, look at that.
Hawaii, California, Washington, Colorado.
Interesting. Florida is not even on that top 10 there.
Yeah.
That surprises me a little bit. I mean, the cost of living is down there and the cost, maybe the income versus that. And Florida really does have some really hot spots, but as a state, there probably isn't quite as many like you would in California on the coast.
And I didn't look at specific cities. If I would have done that, New York probably would have been on the top. New York City.
No, I
probably
think D.C.
top.
probably is top
DC,
still. Probably D.C. But
DC,
New York would
City,
be there.
yeah.
L.A., that type of
probably
thing.
the top. Yeah,
Right.
and Utah, is pretty high up there.
That's in the top 10. So I'll bring that chart up one more time, Mr. Producer Guy. Which one was it? 4? Yeah. So the 40th in that ratio. So 16%, and the average is at 21. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And that is obviously the entire state, which 80% of the population is in the Wasatch Front. It'd be interesting to see how that breaks down countywide.
Yeah.
I would feel out of the counties in Utah, we've got to be one of the top most expensive ratio again as counties go in Utah.
What would you think? As far
do
as
you have that as a chart?
Well, I just out of curiosity, I did a little bit more research. So what city would you guess is the highest or the lowest or the worst?
Worst, okay, yep.
As far as affordability goes.
It's got to be, Park City's got to be up there because, again, what drives its housing market is outside of its area. And that's what we have here in Southern Utah, like the jobs and things and the people that are moving here, bringing their income sources with them, either remote work or retired. so they don't rely on the job in Southern Utah to fund the house they're buying, and they're bringing equity with them, retiring, that type of thing. So I wouldn't say St. George has got to be on the very top of that, but Park City has always been
That's what I guessed. That's what I would have guessed was Park City. So I ran the number for Park City. What would you guess their percentage is?
Okay, so
we're 14%.
Okay.
The state average is 16%. The national average is 21%.
Ooh.
What would you think Park City is?
Ooh, interesting. All right, let's go with, because the worst, and that's obviously
the worst
state-wise.
was Washington, D.C. at 9%.
9%. Holy cow. It can't be worse than that. It's got, I would say 10. Let's go 10. No, let's go 12. I'm going to go 12%.
8%.
8%.
8%.
Holy moly.
I mean, good luck living in Park City.
Yeah, you're not.
The working class is probably not living in Park City.
Yeah. I wonder what some of the other hotspots, like Monterey. Monterey is an area that just seems like it would be very hard for any kind of median income to afford anything in that particular area, which always makes it interesting. The workforce, where do they live? Either they're very high density or have to commute quite a ways to be able to get into those cities, which I think you're starting to see in Southern Utah, that the workforce is having to be a further commute to get into town to be affordable.
Yeah.
And as far as the mortgage side, I'm seeing a lot more people that are cohabitating is a word that's floating around out there, where you are seeing more co-signing, more families coming together.
Multi-generational.
Yep, you're seeing a ton more of that to be able to get everybody into that first house.
Yeah. So going back to President Trump's executive order, what did he not say? There's a couple things he didn't say. He went in a roundabout way. He said we need prices to come down, but he's not going to come out and say that, because that's a very unpopular thing to say from a president. We need everybody to lose equity in their homes. He's not going to come out and say that. But the other thing that kind of struck me that he didn't talk about, which I think is unique, is he didn't talk about loans at all. He didn't talk about interest rates. He didn't talk about loan programs, which in the past, that's how the federal government has tried to fix housing affordability, right? And that's what got us in the mess in 2008, was they came out with all these creative loan programs to get everyone to be able to borrow to buy a house.
Right.
That's not the solution. And so let's talk about solutions. If we're not talking about loan programs at all, interest rates or any of that, how do we make housing more affordable? There's only two options. Either you raise income or you lower values. And so let's look at the next slide there.
Slide number 5.
Yeah,
I think it's 5. Okay.
So option 1, increase income. And so this is the best case scenario. That's a lot. Increasing income is a lot better option than decreasing our home values, I think. And so right now, the current median income in St. George is $81,000. What the income should be, but just to get us back to 18%, what the income should be is $105,000,
which is still under the national, even the average of 21, or the national average of 21, but just to get us closer.
Yeah, and so that's a $24,000. So there's a $24,000 discrepancy there, which is a 30% increase. So income has to increase, household income has to increase by 30% in order to get us to that balance, our average.
Wow. Okay.
Now, that seems like a lot, but if you I looked back at the years, so from 2018 to 2022, in 4 years, we increased 32%, which I was kind of surprised by that.
That is surprising.
So in 4 years, we went up 32%. So if we continue to increase at that rate and home values stay the same, so if we don't experience appreciation or depreciation, we're going to get to that balance of ITP. Where we will be in balance with housing affordability without having to have values come down.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
Option 2 on the next slide is for the home prices to decrease. And so right now, median sales price in St. George area is $585,000. What it should be is $450,000. That's $134,000 over value to make it affordable. That's a 23% decrease. And from 2006 to 2011, so during the crash, it went down 34%.
Interesting. Well, look at this. This is why he's a local expert, guys. This is some great data. I mean, that's great. Okay.
So one of the two, and then option 3 that I didn't really cover in a slide, but just thinking about it, is that maybe that the ITP percentage that we're currently at is the new normal. I mean, it's quite possible as St. George continues to be discovered through Black Desert, through events, through Ironman, through all these things, that we're going to become more and more like Park City. And that average that we've had over the last 20 years is not going to be our average moving forward.
Okay. And that's such a possibility because of all the spotlights. We are a resort community, and we've been so discovered by people that still look at this place as actually affordable in relation to where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And again, if their income sources isn't derived from a W-2 in Washington County from either retirement or selling of a home or remote work, which is such a great area for that as well, and some of the features that are opened up on the I-15 corridor and just the climate and just all the things that kind of drove people here in the first place. And that's where I think that I don't know how much a president can really do with some of that stuff, because he can open up more land and inventory, but that's going to take kind of years to kind of catch up, versus something with the loan side or something with rates to bridge the gap between, okay, I've got my 3% interest rate, but I only owe $300,000 on my home. It's hard for me to go from $300,000 to $600,000 and go from a 3% rate to a 7% rate. So there's going to have to be something in the middle there. But I think economic stimulus and those types of things, given it enough time, should also just help with the cost of money to come back down and get more in line anyway. Because we're really seeing that they're hedging interest rates. They have for quite a while. There's a lot baked in. You had an election year, so everybody's kind of waiting and seeing. It still hasn't really fleshed itself out. So we really do have rates that are probably a little bit higher than what they should be. But there's still uncertainty with tariffs and all the other stuff that's happening out there that is going to kind of keep rates probably the new normal. Like you said, this might be the new normal as far as medium to home price, but we're also probably closer to what the new normal is on interest rates as well.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, my belief is that we want that relationship between income and home values to be as good as possible, because then we're not living and dying by what interest rates do. And that's what we've kind of discovered over the last, 3 years, is that we are our local real estate market is so tied, not local, I mean national, is so tied to what interest rates do.
Right.
I mean, interest rates went up in mid-2022, and the faucet just, basically shut off. There's so many less transactions that are happening now because interest rates went up.
Right.
And so if we can get to a better level of income versus home value, then, I don't think that we'll live and die so much by what interest rates, the ebb and the flow of interest rates.
Yeah, and that's where that supply, I think that's where he's trying to attack at least the one thing that seems to be able to help that balance, that isn't necessarily manipulating currencies or money or debts and all the stuff that they're trying to do with also cutting the budget. We got right now, $1 trillion going just to interest right now in the budget. So it is something where adding more towards currency or interest rate policies are probably going to be worse in the long run than just saying, hey, we've got a chance to add to the inventory, which also should stabilize the prices. Because we got land, we got ways to do it. We got builders that are ready to build. We got the workforce to be able to handle that type of stuff. But it's amazing the existing home sales is so low versus almost anything that's buying, especially Southern Utah has always been kind of a build community. It's been a growing community for 50 years. Different bubbles and stuff have happened, but it's always been much more of a new growing community when it comes to that. So hopefully some of this stuff will filter down to more opportunities for that supply to get more in line as well. Yeah. Because it's weird to see that combination of home prices and interest rates, because the supply is really one of the key problems.
Right. And we're starting to see inventory, not starting to see, but we're in the middle of inventory really growing. This is the busy time of year in Washington County. March, April, May, June is traditionally the busiest months as far as real estate activity. And we saw inventory increase, so a lot of people know that, and so they're putting their homes on the market. We're not seeing buyers keep pace with the new homes going on the market. Right. And so there's downward pressure on home values. Yeah,
I've definitely seen price reductions more often, definitely seen more in certain categories, are definitely sitting a little bit longer because of, again, that combination of the interest rate. That now the prices are starting to kind of be a little bit more stabilized and more affordable in that category. But then if rates can give us a little hand up too, that'll be kind of a wave that allows the inventory to be ahead of that rate curve. So we've been kind of talking about it. If you can find a home right now that fits your budget, it's probably better to jump on it, because if the rates also go down and there's limited inventory, you got way more buyers showing up like that versus the inventory that can be built in that same time frame. Yep. So feels like it is trying to get back to whatever a normal is, which we haven't seen in probably a decade, really. It's been all these weird little
normal?
things. What is normal? Right. So it is something where this is great data. I think it's really an interesting index that you've kind of created there that's pretty interesting, that always has been an issue with Southern Utah.
Yeah. And it's out of balance, and hopefully it'll get back to balance without too much hurt.
Yeah, and that's the idea. Anything that moves too quickly becomes the crashes. If it just kind of stabilizes and moves in the direction time, it really helps. It's when it becomes a crash is when it moves too quickly. And that's what you see in the stock market, what we're seeing. So anyway, we appreciate your time on Jared again for coming on the podcast. You can check us out on YouTube. You can also go to my website at ryanbolton.com. But we appreciate your time and your effort to put this together. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
This has been the Clear to Close podcast. Please submit your comments, questions, and topics for future episodes to cleartoclosepod@gmail.com. That's clear the number 2 closepod@gmail.com or ryanbolton.com. Please like, follow, and share. And until next time, this is the Clear to Close podcast. The views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of Patriot Home Mortgage, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 299717. This has been a production from a podcast studio.